Hey, what's up, YouTube fans? So what I wanted to talk about in this video, right, is this really ridiculous argument called the evolutionary argument against naturalism. I've even seen the YouTuber Alex O'Connor. He, apparently he thinks this is a good argument, and honestly, that guy, I feel like sometimes he tries too hard to see the logic in things that just are not logical, right? But so basically what the argument says is, it says that, if our brain is a product of evolutionary processes without a quote-unquote God involved, right, then that means that our brain is not trustworthy, because whatever we think would just be whatever was best for our survival to think, which wouldn't necessarily be what's true, right? What's best for our survival wouldn't have to be what's true, like best for us to think that is, right? And so, it says that, therefore any conclusion that we come to, about anything, right, like any belief we come to, is totally baseless, unreliable. So there's a lot of big issues with this argument. The first biggest, well, I shouldn't say biggest, the other issues are equally, but one of the big issues, right, is that, so if God has no cause of his own, right, which is generally what they believe, right, he just happens to have always existed, no cause of his own, right, then we really have no basis for thinking that anything God thinks or God believes would be reliable, that it would be true, right? If he truly has no cause, then there's no reason that we would expect that this thing would think things that's true, reliable. I know that they believe that he's all-knowing, but there's really no reason that we would expect that that would be the case, that he would be, if he has no cause of his own, right? And so then to say that this is like an issue that will be solved by God making us, it really wouldn't be, even if it were an issue, or to any extent that it could be an issue. And then, okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing, right, is so the argument assumes that, most of the beliefs humans have are, just deterministically, very deterministically predetermined by our instincts, right? That we just evolved an instinct for every single thought that we have. And that's not how it works, right? The fact that, we think E equals MC squared, it's not like that we have an instinct that tells us that. People didn't think that throughout most of history. They didn't think E equals MC squared. We tested it experimentally. We found it out that it's the case, right? Likewise with most of what we think is not just like that there's like an instinct or intuition that tells us it's the case, right? We evaluated it experimentally, right? And so to say our instincts, if our instincts and intuitions are a product of these processes, how can we trust them? We can't, but we don't have to, right? You don't have to go on instinct or intuition to draw conclusions about what's true, right? Nor should you, right? And so, I mean, and this guy, Alex O'Connor, who he was trying to make it out to be a good argument, he was being like, oh, how do we know that the fact that we think 1 + 1 = 2, that isn't just because we have an instinct that tells us it does? Well, so, I mean, what is your instinct for, 55 times 76? What does that equal? There's no instinct for that. You would have to think it through and do the math. We don't have an instinct for that. And then also, the human reasoning capacity is not what we trust the most of all to do a mathematical equation, right? I would far rather trust a calculator to tell me what's true mathematically than I would trust a human, right? And that's not like strictly circular, right? Because while yes, humans made calculators, it's not like they programmed in every single equation, like, oh, for this and such equation, that's not how it works. They don't go in for every individual equation and program in the answer, right? It follows a system based on rules. It's not programmed for every individual answer to tell you what it is, right? And then also with this whole thing of like, oh, how do we know that we don't have an instinct that's making us think that 1 + 1 = 2? Okay, there are ways of testing that which remove the possibility for bias, right? Put one thing and one thing together, right? And then someone else who wasn't in the room, who didn't observe you doing that, ask them, how many things do I have here now, right? So there are ways of testing that remove this potential for bias, right? So it's not a matter of instinct, intuition. That's not what it's a matter of, right? And what conclusions we draw about what's true or not, it does not have to be based on instinct or intuition, right? Nor should it be, right? And so, people like Alex O'Connor, some people who, want to see the logic in things that there is no logic, they tout an argument up like they try and make this out to be like a good argument. It's really not a good argument at all. It's very silly. It's very, grade school level by how silly it is, or, at least at the very least, very ignorant, right? Also, another important thing is that, for one thing, we shouldn't trust our intuition in telling us what's true. We actually shouldn't just go by intuition, right? But then also an important thing is what someone's intuition is about what's true or not doesn't just strictly boil down to instinct. It's not just purely predetermined by evolution. It's not as simple as that. Yes, evolution led to our existence, but that doesn't mean that everything just, boils down to like evolution in a deterministic sort of way. There's also sociological factors, right? Someone's culture, their upbringing, right? That has a large role in shaping what someone's intuitions are as well. Even, someone's own individual neurology, which varies between individuals, right? So they're looking at things in a very deterministic sort of way, that, the way we evolve just has to predetermine what all of our beliefs are, and that's not how it works, right? The fact that evolution led to our existence, that doesn't mean it predetermines what all of our beliefs are, right? What is your what instinct tells us E equals mc squared. There's no instinct that tells us that. We tested it, right? We figured it out. It's not a matter of instinct at all, right? And so, all right, that's all for now. See you guys.